And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 10 cards that I missed this year. So something that I do every year, and I go back and look at all the sets that we had, and we are getting close to the end of the year. I think probably we don't have any more cards coming out. Certainly we don't have any more sets coming out. I don't think, although last year I was fooled because I think we got Jumpstart dropped on us right before the end of the year. So you never know. Maybe there's some Universes Beyond stuff, Secret Layers, all that. For the most part, I think we've got the cards we're getting this year, and I am going back, looking at all the sets that we've gotten, and picking out the cards that I didn't talk about at all on my channel that I think are actually really good Commander cards. Somebody else might have mentioned them. I myself, I missed them. Now I'm bringing them up. Let's start with Fall of Galadriels from the Lord of the Rings set, and of course, that was a massive set, and I do think it was a really good Commander set. This is a card that it is a little niche, but I actually think this will go in quite a few decks. So 2 and a red enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, amass Orcs X, where X is the excess damage. Now, first of all, you have this ability that's amassing Orcs, so a lot of people think, okay, it goes in that theme. And then you have this other ability that's 7 and a red. That's a lot. Fall of Galadriels deals 7 damage to target creature. So obviously, the idea here is I use that ability, which costs 8 mana. How often am I going to do that? And I deal damage to maybe a 3 toughness creature. I've done 4 excess non-combat damage. Ergo, I will be creating a 4/4 Orc army. That's not bad. For 8 mana, it's not great. I will say, though, having an enchantment set on the battlefield like that later in the game you can pump mana into can be pretty good. However, ignore the last ability. Again, to me, I look at this card and the last ability is just an added bonus, okay? And yes, I will go to maybe the best scenario, which is the Blasphemous Axe scenario. It is one of the most, maybe even the most popular board wipe in the entire format, okay? Whenever any creature an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, you're going to amass Orcs X. So what happens if somebody casts a Blasphemous Act? And again, it doesn't even have to be you. It can be someone else casting it, right? Of course, if you're playing a red deck, you're going to have Blasphemous Act. Not only are you going to get a creature after the board wipe's gone, which is a nice advantage, but you're also going to get possibly a game-ending creature. Like, definitely you'll be one-shotting people with a Blasphemous Act, because any 1/1 creature you're going to amass Orcs 12, right? I mean, you can see where this is going, and it all stacks up. That's how armies work, right? You just stack if you already have an army, you're stacking it on top of there. If you're in any red deck, you're probably doing a little bit of that. Like, I'm not saying this can go in any deck, although it could go in any deck. If you got a mono red deck and you just say, you want to try out a new card, try this out. It sits on the battlefield. Maybe a couple turns will go by and nothing will happen. Maybe you'll lightning bolt your opponent's creature and create an Orc army. Maybe you'll cast a Blasphemous Act and create a giant army. Or maybe later in the game, you got a lot of mana lying around. You could start using that 7 damage target creature. I think it's worth giving a shot in a deck where maybe it doesn't specifically fit, like the Orc army scenario, right? Give it a try. Moving on to Feast of the Victorious Dead. White and a black enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if 1 or more creatures died this turn, you gain that much life and distribute that much +1/+1 counters among creatures you control. This card's fantastic. It was from March of the Machine Aftermath, which I think of all the sets this year, probably got the most overshadowed. It's a very weird set with like 50 cards in it or something. It was weird. This was a really good card. In fact, we got a bunch of good cards from the set. I did a top 10 from that set for only 50 cards. That's saying a lot. And this is one I didn't even talk about that I think is really, really good. 2 mana enchantment. And at the beginning of your end step, if 1 or more creatures died this turn, okay, so any black and white deck where your creatures are dying, I mean, obviously any aristocrats theme, that's great. Again, this is the situation where you're like, okay, you're gaining life and distributing counters. So I want to play it in a deck where I'm sacrificing creatures and doing life gain and no. Just having the creatures die, right? And even if you just have a creature die, you gain a life and you put a counter on a creature. This is only 2 mana. That's pretty great value. I love those enchantments that sit on the battlefield and just give you free value. And maybe if you skip a turn and you don't have a creature die, okay, that's fine. This is actually a really, really good passive effect in a lot of decks. Even if you're not sacrificing your creatures, you just have a creature die or a couple of creatures die, gaining the life, distributing the counters. It's really good value for what you're paying for. All right, a card I missed from Wilds of Eldraine, which, again, maybe someone else mentioned. Funny enough, I was making a deck like a month later after the set came out, and it was in this theme, and I was like, oh, that's actually a really good card. It just came out that I totally missed. Wildwood Mentor, 2 and a green, Tree Folk 1/1. Whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Wildwood Mentor. So again, this is that generic token theme. It's just any deck that cares about tokens, that's making tokens, whether it be sapperling tokens or elf tokens or food tokens, or maybe treasure tokens if you're doing that in green, clue tokens, lots of decks in green that are doing that. So any token entering the battlefield, this guy's going to get a counter on him. Also though, whenever a Wildwood Mentor attacks, another target attacking creature gets +X until end turn, where X is Wildwood Mentor's power. So again, in like a food deck, maybe you got a little bit of trouble closing out the game. This is a great addition, right? You're cranking out those tokens, those food tokens. This guy's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when he attacks, makes another creature bigger, right? So now you got two big, beefy attacking creatures, which again is just, I'm doing that in my deck anyway. I'm cranking out those food tokens or clue tokens or whatever, growing a big creature while I'm at it. Definitely a card that you could give consideration for any green deck where you're making tokens. Let's talk about Fear Fire Foes. This one also from Lord of the Rings. And, you know, I actually added this to a deck because it specifically fit the theme. I would say this isn't great at what it's doing, but in certain themes, it gets a heck of a lot better. So X and a red sorcery. Damage can't be prevented this turn. That's very important. By the way, I will, for the umpteenth time, bring up on my channel that includes protection, okay? If a creature has protection from red, this will actually kill them. Protection specifically prevents damage. That's what it does as far as my creature doesn't take damage if it has protection from red. It specifically prevents damage. This says damage can't be prevented, and as I've mentioned on my channel several times in the last couple months, can't trumps everything else. If your card says can't, that means it's not happening. That's not why I'm talking about it. It's just a nice little added bonus. So Fear Fire Foes deals X damage to target creature and 1 damage to each other creature with the same controller. So this is a one-sided board wipe, one direction board wipe, whatever you want to call it, where it just hits that one guy, right? Which is sometimes really good, sometimes really bad. You know, there are the situations where that one guy's doing really, really good and you just want to hit him. There's actually not a lot of board wipes that will direct at one player. Now, this is not necessarily a board wipe, right? It's going to deal X damage to one creature, which is not super great. It's just a fireball, right? And then 1 damage to each other creature. So there are situations where it could be really good. Again, Sapperling Tribal, or they, you know, maybe they just cast a Avenger of Zendikar and they didn't put any counters on them, right? Pretty fringe, sure. But in specific decks, this is extra good. And again, getting back to the first card I talked about, Fall of Karandros, where you are dealing lots of non-combat damage decks like that, where I threw this card in is my Bralin deck. And funny enough, I threw it in that deck because I actually did run into the situation where my opponent was preventing damage. I couldn't deal damage to them. And of course, because I can't deal damage to them, my commanders shut off, which kind of sucks. But also, this is also good there because I have a lot of those Torbrand type of effects in that deck, where if a red source you control deals damage, right? So that's a commander, right? There's a deck where this is a phenomenal fit because now I pay, say, 4 for X. So this is 5 mana. 4 is X, but it's +2, so 6 damage I'm doing to the one creature, and then 3 damage to each other creature. That's pretty fantastic. That is a pretty fantastic one direction board wipe. Garrison Starn's one of those commanders that every set you're going to get more and more cards that are just phenomenal fits. This seems like a phenomenal fit there as well, because of course, 1 damage to your opponent's creatures, your Garrison Starn's going to pull out his pistols and start shooting them as well. This card doesn't go in every deck, but I think it's a real good, it's a slam dunk in a lot of those certain commanders. All right, next up, Traverse Eternity. 2 blue sorcery. Draw cards equal to the highest mana value among historic permanents you control. And of course, this is from the Doctor Who set. I did do a video about the cards you got to be aware of. The cards that I think are great fits in Commander. And this is another one, again, that I passed over. That, again, I just stumbled across while I was making a deck. A historic deck, as it were. And I just made my video about Universes Beyond and how, yes, unfortunately, there is a lot of people that don't love it. A lot of people that aren't going to touch these Doctor Who cards. I did a poll on my Patreon and 25% of my patrons said they weren't going to touch these cards. So, you know, whatever, whether you like it or not, I'm giving you an option if you like it. And if you don't like it, maybe you're on the fence about it, maybe you could reconsider, because this is actually a really good card. I think it's a great card draw option. And of course, historic permanent means artifact, legendary, or saga. And if you're in any of those themes, okay, fine, but just your commander, right? To me, this is sort of Stinging Study, and I'm a huge fan of Stinging Study. One of my favorite card draw spells in the format. Traverse Eternity, very similar, where you can just think of it as draw cards equal to the mana value of your commander, right? Of course, it's got to be in play. So for that reason, it's not as good as Stinging Study. But your commander's in play and you just pay 4. And yes, someone can remove your commander in response. That would suck. And now you're going to draw cards equal to your arcane signet, right? It's very unlikely, even if your opponents are trying to screw you over, it's very unlikely that you won't at least get a couple cards off of this, right? You're going to have maybe a 3 mana value mana rock in play that you'll draw 3 cards, 4 mana, draw 3 cards. That's a harmonize, right? People still play that card, even though I don't think it's particularly good. But if your commander costs 4, 5, 6 mana, right, this could be a fantastic draw spell. I think it's a pretty good one. Moving on, Aki Scrap Chomper, 1 red, Phyrexian Goblin, 1/1. Pay 1 and a red, tap, sacrifice an artifact or land, draw a card. Pretty great. This is red card draw, by the way. That's one of the reasons why I'm giving it a mention. People always talk about how, oh, I can't draw cards. I mean, I think we're finally past that. I hope we're finally past that. I mean, Archivist of Ogma has been out for more than a year now. Esper Sentinel has been out for 2 years now. I don't think white needs it anymore. I think red needs it, and I think this is a great one. Yes, obviously, this fits in the artifact or land sacrifice theme, which in red, probably a lot of sacrifice artifact themes. Funny enough, I just put together a white and red sacrifice land theme and came across this guy and I'm like, that's going in the deck because I want to be doing that anyway, right? So it's a win-win. I want to sacrifice my lands and obviously drawing cards is always good. This is, though, just a decent option. If I was in a goblin deck, I might play this because mono red doesn't draw cards very well. So now I can just sacrifice a land that I don't really need and draw a card or an artifact. Mana rock that's been, that arcane signet was great for me early in the game. Now I don't need it. I want to draw some cards. So this mostly becomes 2 mana draw card later in the game, which is great because the things I'm sacrificing I don't really need. I also really like this in a treasure token theme because, yes, believe it or not, you will get into those situations where you just got a bunch of treasure tokens lying around and you don't need mana, right? Again, later in the game, I got like 8, 10 lands. I don't need the treasure tokens. I need card draw. I see that happen all the time. Start sacrificing your treasure tokens to draw cards. I think this is a card that definitely deserves probably more play than it's getting right now. All right, one more from Doctor Who, because again, I think this is a really good one. Gallifrey Falls, 4 red, but it's a split card. No more, 2 and a white. Both sides are instants, as always is the case with split cards, but this is the fuse version where, of course, you can cast both, which is relevant. It's a lot. Obviously, 6 and 3, that's 9 mana. So are you going to do this at the same time? You could. It could be pretty good, but I think likely that's not going to happen a lot. Both sides are really, really good, though. So Gallifrey Falls, the 6 mana instant red side is 4 damage to each creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. Now, that's not the greatest board wipe ever. And obviously, you're in white. So, you're in white and red. So you have access to pretty much the best board wipes in the entire format. So I don't think you're putting this in there for the board wipe option. It is instant speed, and finding those instant speed board wipes is really tough. It is nice. Like a lot of people will say, oh, I don't like a 6 mana board wipe because I cast the austere command or whatever on my turn and then, I'm tapped out and I can't really do anything. So it gives an advantage to my opponent because they're the first player who gets to start playing things after the board wipe. Okay, I don't agree with that. But if you're that person, now I can spend 6 mana, wipe a bunch of creatures, maybe not all, but 4 damage is pretty good, and then untap on my turn, and now I get to start playing stuff, right? So it gets around that. However, I really like this card for the no more side. Again, it's an instant. Any number of target creatures you control phase out. So, of course, that's why it works with the damage side, because I can phase out all my creatures, right? Any number is a pretty good number, right? That's likely going to be all your creatures. I'm just going to phase out all my creatures, and then 4 damage to everyone else's creatures. And again, you can do that. You can, if you got 9 mana open, do this at instant speed, phase out all your creatures, kill everyone else's, untap on your... Now, not only do you get to untap and do stuff, but you also have all your creatures in play as well. But likely, I would say, and I am, yes, putting this in... I have 2 white-red decks now, and I'm going to put this in one of them. I imagine I will 90% of the time just be casting no more for 2 and a white, phase out all my creatures, which is the best way to protect your creatures. There is a whole lot of white 3 mana, I protect my team cards out there. Flawless Maneuver, I guess, even though it is free if you have your commander out, is one as well. in this mana value range, and this is an option that is going to phase out your creatures, which is that gets around the Farewell and the Cyclonic Rift I made a short a little while ago about. And no, I'm not saying Farewell's as good as Cyclonic Rift necessarily. I'm just saying the mentality towards those cards is the same, where people are really starting to hate Farewell just like they hate Cyclonic Rift. Honestly, I think I'm starting to hate Farewell more than Cyclonic Rift. You can recover from a Cyclonic Rift. Farewell, you just can't recover from. I don't care if it's not one-sided. I digress. No More gets around both of those, right? Phasing out your creatures gets around both of those. By the way, more to come there. All right, let's talk about Dusk Legion Duelist. And I'm a little embarrassed that I missed this one because it is pretty obvious. I'm sure there is a lot of people that talked about it. 1 and a white, Vampire Soldier 2/2 with Vigilance. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Dusk Legion Duelist, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This came out in Frixiol will be 1. And there was a lot to talk about there in my own defense. So I did miss this one, but it is, I mean, it's specific. It's obviously going to go in a deck where you're putting +1/+1 counters on your creatures in white, but there is a whole lot of those. It's an auto include, I think. I got to give it a mention. I didn't talk about it all on my channel. You know, trigger only once each turn. Like, who cares, right? At this point, I think we all realize that's not that big of a deal. You put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures, you get the draw card. Again, here we are again with the fantastic white card draw, right? You got the generic stuff that's really, really good in any deck, and then you have the stuff like this that in specific themes is fantastic. I don't know. You'd be hard pressed to not put this in a +1/+1 counter theme in white. It's just great card draw. All right, the last two cards I'm going to talk about in this video are cards that a lot of people are unaware of, and funny enough, I even ordered some and just talked about it with my patrons last night when I was playing a game, because I put one of them in my deck, and they had no idea. Like, where did that come from? There's a few cards that fall into this situation. Legolas's Quick Reflexes is one of them. I didn't do a ton of research here, I'll be honest, but they came out with some Lord of the Rings stuff after the fact. It just dropped recently, I believe. There wasn't a real big announcement for it. I didn't even know it was a thing. I had to do some research myself. It's kind of tough to find. They reprinted a bunch of stuff for like a holiday pack or something, but they had some unique cards in there. In fact, there's even a commander. I think it's a Renown commander that, if you're interested, that you're making a Renown deck, there you go. But there's a couple of really, really fantastic, again, cards that just work really, really well in Commander that I got to talk about. This is one of them. It's already a pretty expensive card, so there's obviously some people out there that are very well aware of it. 1 green mana instant with Split Second, and of course we all love Split Second because that gets around a whole lot of stuff, counter spells included. Untap target creature until end of turn. It gains hexproof, reach, and whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. That's a whole lot of stuff for 1 green mana. Wow. You could easily put this in any deck, and I'm trying to get a copy of it right now if I can get my hands on one. Like I said, it's getting a little pricey already, so hopefully I will have purchased my copy before this video comes out. I really want this for my Questing Beast deck, even though, funny enough, my Questing Beast has Vigilance, so it doesn't have to tap, but that's okay, because the rest of this stuff is fantastic. Until end of turn, my commander gets hexproof, so just one of those spells, and there are a few out there. Instant speed, I protect my commander from that Path to Exile or that targeted removal. Giving it reach as well can be, again, I'm looking at my Questing Beast, I'm thinking my opponent flies in with their Giant Angel. My commander has Death Touch. Now I can block it. And whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature again. That doesn't work so great with my commander. So now I'm second guessing whether this goes in my Questing Beast deck. Ugh. But it's such a good card though, right? The Split Second, right? The Split Second is the part that really sells it for me, where it's very difficult for your opponents to get around that. If they're trying to kill your commander, 1 green mana Split Second, they can't do anything until this resolves, for those who don't know how that works. So your commander is guaranteed going to get the hexproof. I don't know how they would get around it. They would have to cast a board wipe or something. And if it's on your turn, unlikely they're going to be doing that unless they got that Gallifrey Falls. Anyway, all of that other stuff is just gravy as far as I'm concerned. Funny enough, the deals damage equal to power part does actually fit in that deck, because that's a bit of a Death Touch tribal thing. So I could use it on my other creatures as well. A creature that actually taps. Again, it's almost unfortunate that my commander has Vigilance there. But now I can actually use it on a different creature and use it as a fight effect as well. So this card's just doing so much. For 1 mana, art's really cool too. Yeah, I'm definitely getting my hands on at least one copy of this. I'm not sure where I'm putting it yet, but it is a really cool card. And I'm sure a lot of people out there don't even know it exists. Same goes for the last card I'm talking about today, which came out in the same set, the Lord of the Rings box set, whatever it's called. Galadriels Dismissal, 1 white mana. Instant, has kicker, 2 and a white. Target creature phases out. If this spell was kicked, each creature target player controls phases out instead. So, like I just talked about, I mean, I don't think I have to go over how amazing phasing is. It gets around a whole lot of things. So for 1 white mana, and again, this is the best way to protect your commander, right? Or whatever creature you don't want to die. For 1 white mana, I mean, again, for me, I already own a couple copies of this because this one is way better than, I don't know about way better, but for me, you know, for whatever reason, Legolas's Quick Reflexes is pretty darn expensive. This one's not so bad. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to grab a couple copies of that before people figure out how good it is. Yes, Legolas's Quick Reflexes is really good. I think this is better because this is 1 white mana. I guaranteed protect my creature, right? Hexproof only protects against certain things. This protects against absolutely everything. If it was kicked, each creature target player controls phases out instead, which means for 4 mana, I can phase out my whole team again. So I'm back in that scenario. However, as I say all the time, cards in the Commander format get so much better when you can use them on your opponents as well. This is also, my opponent just threw the breach to Blightsteel Colossus. There goes that scenario again. And is about to kill me. I can 1 white mana phase that out. This is just target creature phases out. My opponent has a Kiki Jiki they're about to go off. This is a temporary removal spell, right? Temporary removal spell that hits indestructible creatures as well, right? But of course, the kicker option can work on your opponents as well, and I would say that's less likely. However, there is, again, the Craterhoof situation where, again, this is each creature target player controls, so I can phase out their entire team. They think they got the game won. Craterhoof Behemoth, Triumph of the Horde, whatever. Those I win right now cards, they're coming in, they're going to run over you or maybe everybody with their entire team. 4 mana, I phase out your whole team. Problem solved, right? Not only that, they don't have any blockers until their next turn. So I just love cards like this. Again, I know a lot of people, again, judging by the price, I think, my guess is everyone really likes the Legolas's Quick Reflexes more. For me, this card is so versatile, so great, gets around so many things. Again, I'm really starting to be annoyed by Farewell, and this gets around that. So this, again, I already grabbed 2 copies of this before it gets too expensive because I think it will, especially after I mention it on this video. And again, a lot of people don't even know exist. That's why I had to give these 2 cards a mention. I haven't talked about them yet this year, and I did sort of miss them. And probably a lot of other people missed them as well because, you know, there wasn't a big announcement, I don't think. So there's probably a lot of Commander players out there that don't even know these cards exist. And if you are thinking of purchasing them or any other, I do have a TCG player link. It's in the description below. It helps support the channel. Give it a click if you want to buy any of these cards that I have raised your attention to that maybe you didn't know exist. Some pretty great ones here. These are all really great Commander cards, I think, that came out at some point this year that might deserve your attention. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.